My name is Maniza Naqvi, and this is the 10th episode of the Little Book Company podcast. And today I'm in conversation with Shazaf Fatima Haider, who has published two novels. Her first novel is How It Happened, and her second novel is A Firefly in the Dark. Welcome, Shazaf.
Thank you, Maniza. Lovely to be here.
So great to have you here. And just before we started the podcast, we were talking, and I feel like a lot of that should have been in the podcast. Um, Shaz-
Yes, let me just reiterate. We basically started talking about each other and how we like each other. And I said about Maniza that I think she's amazing and I think she's very enterprising with the Little Book Company, with her various novels, and with her recent story, her moth story, which I think everybody should listen to if they can get at it. And she's one of the real people out there. And I think that's amazing.
well, Shazab, that's not what I was thinking of. Thinking about. I was
But
more about your
oh,
novel that you started writing or is about
mhm.
to be published.
That is, you to talk about that part. Acha, मैंने तो तारीफ कर दी, but
But
it's okay.
thank you. Shukriya. Bahut bahut. Thank you so much for that huge compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, my third novel is coming out hopefully this July, and it's called A Woman on a Suitcase.
Mm,
And it is mm, basically about a young woman who decides whether or not she wants to take the decision to divorce her husband. And it's that journey
mm.
that a lot of women go through, and so I wanted to write that. So that comes out this July. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it will be available easily, and I hope people like it.
And who is publishing it?
It is being published by Penguin India and also Liberty Books in Karachi. So
Wonderful.
that's exciting. Yeah, yeah.
And what what brought you to writing this novel? Why this story?
So I don't know if many people know this, but my first novel was written after I had divorced, um, and I had left my first marriage.
Mm.
And I didn't want anybody to know, and I kept that very quiet because I didn't want the reading of how it happened to be colored by that fact. I wanted to not to be a bitter book. People could have taken it as that, and I wanted it to be a fun book because I had written half of it before I had gotten married, and then I finished it after I got divorced.
Hmm.
Um, but for my second book, I talked to my then agent, Bob Wyatt, and I said, "Look, I think I should write a book about my divorce." And he said, "Nope, you're too close to it. You need some distance."
Hmm.
And when COVID hit, I needed to write about something. I needed to escape my family. And so I needed to escape into my own world. And then I thought that it had been, I think, 6 or 7 years since my divorce. And I felt that I was in the right position. Because you know what happened in when I was at first I wanted to get back at my ex and his family. But when you get that distance, you realize that that is not it. You have to figure out why something happened. And in doing so, the story becomes not about revenge, but about healing.
Hmm.
And not a tell all, but a sort of reconciliation in your mind.
Hmm.
And that is so much better for the reader than just a nasty story about what, you know, your in laws did to you. And also, then the great thing was that the distance allowed me to expunge them from the story altogether. So it's not about them, it's a completely different story. It arose from my experiences, but it is not
About them.
based on my experiences.
So it's not about them. What a triumph! Because uh, uh, a psychologist said to me once when I was
Mm.
in the throes of a heartbreak that what
Oh,
what was not interesting was why he left, but
Hmm.
rather why I stayed.
Yes. And I think that is such a interesting way of looking at it. Why do so many women stay?
Mhm.
And it's so easy to say majboori. It is so easy to say, oh, I don't have any other choice. But very early on, and you know what? I'm not an advocate for leaving marriage just at the drop of a hat. It's a very serious decision. I was very privileged. I had no children and I had another home to go to, which was safe and welcoming. Um, but that's not why I left. I did not leave because it was easy, because I was afraid of all that would happen. Um, but I just woke up one day, one night, a difficult night, and I woke up and I said, no, I've been given one life and I can do so much more with it. But I cannot be the person I want to be if I stay with difficult people who want to keep hammering me down. I can't do that. So, and I felt it would be a colossal loss.
Mhm.
And I left because of that. I left for the potential I knew I had in me. I left for all the love that I knew that was out there, but and I could have, maybe I would access it, maybe I didn't. But I would prefer a life of courage rather than a life of safety, status quo, and misery. Mhm.
Well said.
Yeah.
Um, I think I could never bring myself to get into this contract of marriage because I was
Yeah.
so afraid that I would not be able to keep my own boundaries, that I
Mm.
would not be able to hold my own and be my own person. And so I think it takes a tremendous, self-awareness and character to be able to have a marriage and be your own person
Yeah.
and grow as your own person, which
You know,
way,
in our culture, people really vilify specifically women for having boundaries. Have you noticed that?
yes,
I mean, it is almost seen as battamizi. It is almost seen as arrogance to say, you can come this far, but not further.
yeah.
And that is so essential to protection, you know,
Mhm.
that is so essential to thriving. And I'm very lucky that the man I'm married to now, you know, he sometimes reminds me because you know how you are we are raised I was raised in a family where you sacrifice everything and that still is inside of me, and he says no, you can't do that because you will resent me for these decisions that you're making. You can only be happy if you do follow your dreams, because if you give up your dreams for the family you will resent family, and I cannot allow that to happen. And never uses the word allow. He knows that that's not a word that I would take kindly to, but he says I can't let that happen to you and to us. And he's a very evolved human being, and he will, you know, he'll say, "I'm not a feminist," but he is a feminist, and I accidentally married a feminist, and it's the best thing I did because he just understands.
Mhm.
And and I think that you know, this is it. You have to look for these men, and you cannot drop your standards, and you cannot negotiate. Yeah, अच्छा
Should,
मैं इतना कर लूंगी तो that'll be okay. You know, no, this is it. This is what you need in order to be your person.
should women in Pakistan look at the mothers of the men they are about to marry and see what kind of women they are and what they do and how their attitudes are towards the world at large to see the man they're going to marry?
Now, this brings the conversation into dangerous territory. But I don't think that anyone, you know, I we used to be told, but you know, I was in St. Joseph's, and Miss Kazi used to tell us, Miss Faiza Kazi, she says, if you want to marry a man, first see how he treats his mother, and then see how he treats the staff, okay, people who are serving him. I think the second is excellent advice. But the first is problematic because men and their mothers have different relationships, and they will not necessarily translate into the relationships they have with their wives.
I
I
didn't
would certainly say, sorry.
I didn't mean how they treat their mothers. I meant the
Huh.
mother herself, how she brought up her son.
I feel that I feel that you need to see, and this sounds so callous and it will be taken in such a terrible way, but has the son outgrown the mother? Then you're in for, you know?
Yes,
You know
that's.
what I mean? Has the mother out allowed this outgrowing to happen? So the way she is in the world is completely different, and that has no bearing on whatever's going to happen. How she's raised him, you don't know. You will never know. Everybody has their best manners on before any marriage. But you do get a sense of whether the son has outgrown the mother or the father. And that does not mean disrespecting or anything. That just means, is he his own person?
Mhm,
And I think that that is a test many men in Pakistan would fail.
mhm, mhm.
So, and I wish that I had applied that test in the first instance.
Well,
But we are told that man who loves his parents is everything. Absolutely, love is one thing. Codependency is completely different.
mhm,
And yeah, attachment, unhealthy attachments. These are all, you know, these are all things to be investigated. And my main question in the novel that's going to come out in July, A Woman in a Suitcase, a woman on a suitcase, not in a suitcase,
I love the name.
but
A woman on a suit.
on a suitcase. Huh. My daughter who criticizes everything says it should be in the suitcase. Maine kaha, beti, it's not that kind of a story. But you know, is why is emotional abuse um so permissible and normalized in our society? And the abuse is not just between the husband and the wife, it is between the parent. It's the way we operate in this strangely boundaryless world, you know?
Mhm,
So I think that is very key to um, bad relationships and all of that.
mhm. Do you think that only pertains to our society in Pakistan?
No, I was having a conversation with a friend who is British, who is going through a lot of grief.
Mm,
Um, and her husband doesn't quite understand or empathize. I think a lack of empathy is a human condition as much as too much empathy is a human condition. So, but I think in Pakistan, when I was in Pakistan, I can't talk about Pakistan now. I've been out of it for 9 years. But what I see is um, that people are not willing to have these conversations about relationships, intimacy, boundaries, sex, sexual health. It is all very taboo still.
mhm,
Whereas over here, people are at least able to talk about it in certain settings.
mhm,
Whether it is brash, whether it is, they make light of it, something is mentioned where it's all under the carpet. Um, I talk about grief in my book, and I also talk about the pleasure, the pleasure as the antidote to grief.
mhm,
When you are in the midst of grief, you can't do much, but you can give yourself the pleasure that other people cannot, and that has an incredibly healing capacity. But if you talk to any married woman about pleasure, especially self pleasure, that conversation is usually shut down. You know,
mhm.
um, so I've explored all of that in the book.
When you say self pleasure, can you unpack that a bit?
Yes, it is the kind that you can buy, and it is silicone.
All right, then. Um,
Yes,
right.
it is. It is. It is. I think. I think a lot of Um, when I went through my divorce, you will be surprised at the number of ostensibly happy, like overtly happily married women who post everything about how brilliant their lives are, calling me, and basically asking me how bad it was for me because they were considering leaving.
Hmm.
Um, most of them cited a lack of relationship, a lack of intimacy in their marriages.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting
I find that so
because,
sad.
but I also find it interesting. It's very sad. I mean, all of it is sad, but I feel like, oh my gosh, part of a marriage that people are denying themselves for some reason. There are many, many reasons, and we can. I can't generalize. There's every relationship is specific, but I feel like I had a conversation early on with my therapist about pleasure, and I was alone, and I was like, I don't know. I want it. It sounds so wrong. Um, but it's my relationship with myself, you know. And it's a relationship with my body. And also, by the way, how can you get someone else to give you pleasure if you don't know how to give yourself pleasure?
Hmm.
The expectations that we place on men are also really high, you know.
I felt
How?
that in
Mm,
Pakistan, we are supposed to ignore that we have a body. And,
yes,
we try to be so ashamed. We are so ashamed somehow of our bodies. We're forever covering them in every way we can. And even when we're not covering them, there's something very deeply uh, ashamed about us.
I think that's very true for women. Um, and I think for men, it's a tremendous pressure to perform and to be the greatest lover in the world and to know exactly what the woman wants. And
Mm,
that usually results in performance anxiety or whatever. And that performance anxiety, that thing that happens in the bedroom spills over to other aspects of the relationship where they need to make them feel that I'm the man and you do this and you do that, and I will curtail your life and I will show you my masculinity. If I can't show it in the bedroom, then I can show it you in other ways of control. um I think it's not just one of those, you can't just wave it away as a ganda topic or a dirty topic. It's not. It's a very essential conversation.
I think so too. But don't you also think that that men and women in Pakistan, or and boys, teenagers, have such little opportunities and chances to really explore their physical relationships, and whatever exploration that is done is either done through some um, sort of hidden secret manner, or takes on actually abuse, a form of abuse. Um,
Not just in Pakistan, I was watching a a documentary where most boys over here, especially now, I'm talking about COVID, post COVID, they were all their access to women has for boys in where I come in the UK post COVID of a particular age group bracket tends to be through pornography, which is inherently violent.
mhm,
So, there's that. Also, uh, there was a conversation, and there is a conversation about social media, the influence of Andrew Tate, and all the like, and the toxic masculinity they preach
mhm,
to boys. Um, my stepson studies in an all boys school, and they talk to his class when he was in O levels about consent, and the fact that the speaker was vilified and made fun of. This is a global problem.
mhm.
Okay, this is a global problem. And in I think in Pakistan there's too little opportunity. Here I think there's too much opportunity at too young an age. You know, and I think um, I think sex is serious business. You can't just do it at 13, 15. I mean, you just I have many opinions, but I just feel that if you are not in yourself a complete person, And by a complete person, I mean mature, knowing your body, everything. How can you engage in a relationship which will be positive in any way for yourself or the other person? Yeah,
Well,
you can't. And someone will end up getting hurt. Either they will end up getting physically hurt or emotionally hurt. They will get embarrassed. They were ashamed of their bodies. Um, and yes, I think in Pakistan, how can how do young people meet in a way that they are not shamed? So I live in a protected gated community, and sometimes, you have these teenagers on a date, and you have these aunties and uncles hunting down these cars where a boy and a girl are sitting there and then complaining about them. But yeah, they're just trying to have a private conversation, you
mhm.
know?
Now, where are
And
you?
even that is taboo.
Are you
Um,
UK or are you talking about?
I'm talking, so a gated community, I lived in Karachi.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not rich enough to live in a gated community, London. Um, yeah, I'm talking about there. And I remember when I was engaged to my husband, we just didn't know where we could express any affection. And by the way, we were married, and I was waiting to join him in London. And, you know, it's really funny. We can tell you which elevators can allow you the opportunity for the longest kiss in Karachi. Because where else do you kiss your husband? And it's very funny because we like holding hands when we're going anywhere. And if we're traveling by airport, and if we reach Dubai and we go to the terminal where we go to Karachi, we have to, okay, now we can't hold hands. Now we can't express anything. And I find that, as a bit of a loss.
Huh.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, it is. I'm just thinking back to um, the very shocked look on a very young aunt's face when my dad held my mother's hand while they were watching
Mhm.
TV, and and then turned to me and sort of whispered in this theatrical way, "Love marriage, you know."
Even today, by the way, my mother was telling me about a young cousin who's gotten engaged, but she had to put in this, pata nahi arrange hai ya love hai, but I don't know. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? But this distinction is still there. And I think it's linked to religion. I think it's linked to respectability, propriety, and all of that.
Mhm.
Um,
Very much so. Uh,
mm,
I was invited to for a book reading at a school in my father's clan in Karachi, and uh, and over there I talked about this and that, and I talked about my parents about them meeting up in Karachi and falling in love and then getting married, and my mother was so cross with me because I had somehow um, said something embarrassing about them falling in love and getting married out of choice. And
mm.
it was baffling and amusing at the same time. Um, but there you are. I think those things still are very much with us. Although it
And
seems,
and I think there's a terrible loss because if you cannot give your love story to your children, then how do you expect them to search for their own love story? You
yes.
know, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky that the man I married is my love. He is, we fell in love, mashallah. He's my partner. I think he's my soulmate. And I don't take these things lightly. I was, very ready after a certain age to marry, not age, but at a certain time to marry for convenience. Okay, let's, maybe companionship and whatever, whatever. But I stumbled into someone who actually loved me for who I am, who I love. And little things like this, okay, which elevator in Karachi gives you the most time for the best kiss. By the way, Avari Hotel, the elevator from the top to the bottom gives you a good like 2 minutes. You can have a satisfying kiss at that. But things like that. Uh,
Enjoying.
Conversations. We talked and talked and talked, and I told my students, I was teaching at the time, and they said, Miss, when they found out that I was married, and, Miss, is he romantic? And I said, yes, but do you know the most romantic thing he did for me? They were like, Miss, what? They were expecting flowers, chocolates, whatever. And I said, I had written an article, and he said, let me read it. And I sent it to him. And he's a lawyer and he's reading documents all day long. He sent it back to me within 10 minutes, proofreading it and highlighting all the grammatical and technical errors. Now, that would have, I found that incredibly, incredibly flattering, because before this, no man had bothered to engage with me as a writer, you know? And the fact that he took interest, he gave me comments, not corrective comments. I like this. I like this part. This is a great introduction. You spelled this word wrong. All of that. Um, I thought that was incredibly romantic. And this is obviously for me, I mean, the nerd that I am, but I felt that I have never had the experience of a man being that interested in what I do and who I am. I've had experiences of men, you know, feigning interest. I've had experiences of men dismissing. I've had experiences of men not engaging or bypassing to talk about my real role that I will play in their lives as wife and future mother, you know. But here was a man who read everything. He read my novels, he read my blog. He approached me with a sense of reverence, which was incredibly flattering.
Wow. Um,
Yeah.
so, Shazaf, hold that thought,
Mhm.
and we're going to take a pause here and
Yeah.
then come right back in again, okay?
Okay.
So, Shazaf, we're talking about the sense you had of your husband showing you reverence,
Yes.
and that was so important.
It was so novel,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And if you look at it, if you want to talk about Islam, as we all feel the need to do so, look at the reverence that the Prophet had for Khadija, Hazrat Khadija. I mean, you talk about following in the footsteps of the Prophet. Why don't women demand that relationship?
Mm. And what does your husband think of your new novel?
I think he really likes it. He does like it. He's read it.
Mhm.
He's proofread it also. Yes, lots of grammatical errors, and you've got the strong. You really need to pay more attention when you're proofreading. Lots of yeah. Um, yeah, I think he likes it. I think he's incredibly secure with it. Because a less secure man would not like to read the story because he would be reminded of, oh, did this actually happen? No, no questions, nothing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
So, did you find this to be a cathartic experience?
I found it to be a very traumatic experience. Because, when you are revisiting trauma,
Mm.
because, first you write, like, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if this is in line with your experience of writing a novel, but first you have to write first draft to tell yourself the story, and then the subsequent drafts are there to tell the reader the story, and then the story becomes something completely different.
Mm.
Um, but as I was writing about Seema, who's my protagonist,
Mm.
a lot of memories that were hidden came up, and I had lots of nightmares. And this was the time when we were in peak lockdown in COVID.
Mhm.
I was pretty sleep deprived because my twins were 1 year old. Yeah, they were one. They weren't even one. They were less than one. So I was sleep deprived and all of that.
Mm.
Um, and then when I did sleep, there were lots of nightmares. There was lots of me waking up and finding out that my husband had gone and my ex was in his place, and that kind of trauma.
Mm. Wow.
Um, but as I rewrote the story and it became about something else, it became about healing. It became about it, not about punishing, not about complaining, but about try, you know uh, trying to understand what makes the person who oppresses you why do they oppress you? Just getting into their shoes for a bit.
Hmm.
And you realize that the enemy is not so powerful, and the enemy is not an enemy at all,
Hmm.
you know? Um,
And so,
that was very powerful. That allowed me to heal a lot of things in my mind, because I don't know how most divorces go, but for me, I left and then nothing was resolved. There was no closure. One day, the papers came and that was it. And luckily it was a clean break. There were no children to carry any link onwards.
hmm.
So I think that it I got a lot of closure from this book
So
for my.
what did you without giving away the plot or any vital part of the plot of your novel, um, in reality, what did you see as the reason why someone oppresses?
Because they're afraid, because they are being oppressed.
Mhm.
They are being oppressed. And I realized this, that God, it's the patriarchy which oppresses the men and the women. The
Mhm.
men have this pressure to be the man, and the women have this pressure to, either submit or manipulate their way to create a small little space that is vastly unsatisfying for themselves.
Mhm.
Life is so much bigger, but you can't do these things. You can't go for the bigger life unless you have courage. And for courage, you have to launch off from the safe space of misery. And misery is a very safe space to be in. It's not a pleasant space to be in, but you have to be very stubborn in your pursuit for happiness and joy. And people, when I say this to people, and I say this to women who are in bad marriages, friends or whatever, they say, "Tum to kitabi baatein kar rahe ho." These are all bookish things that you're saying. They're not. This is my experience. I left when my father had died. I had no job. I did go into to a certain amount of security, but at my core, I felt threatened and attacked by all the people who'd said all sorts of cruel things. You
Hmm.
know, um, and you don't know. I mean, you're all, and actually, the experience of divorce taught me. First of all, gave me two gifts. It gave me the gift of my relationship with God, and secondly, it gave me the gift of standing on my own 2 feet
Mhm.
and realizing that I can't depend on anybody else. I want to have relationships. I want to have friendships. I want to have, you know, I want romance. I want all of that. But I cannot depend on it. And I cannot cling to it as a lifeline, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
I think, and I think, I think it's not unrelated that if your lifeline, if spirituality, your connection with God, the creator, whatever you want to think of it as, for me it's Allah. That's my lifeline. And I remember praying to God early on and I'd saying, God, you're far too invisible and far away. You send me people in my life who can help me.
Mhm.
And he has. And I feel, but at the same time, this ability to fend for myself, to earn, to say no, to not feel afraid. If I say no to this, then nobody else will come. These are experience because I don't want to be back in that horrible space of misery because I don't know, I'm not brave enough to search for anything better out there.
The safe space of misery, you called it, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm. And um, and then you started working.
Yes. So I started teaching A levels and I wrote my second. So my first book came out actually a year after my divorce, which was amazing because it changed my identity because everybody was viewing me as a failure, as a divorcee, as someone whose life was over, and suddenly a book is coming out by Penguin, and there's a book launch, and I'm being invited to all these festivals, and there's quite a brouhaha about it. How it happened created quite a stir, which was lovely, and I needed something positive in my life at that point. So so that happened. And then I got married. And while I was pregnant, I wrote and I finished A Firefly in the Dark.
Okay, wait, let's go back a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your first book, how it happened. Tell us.
It it is a satire on arranged marriages. It
Mhm,
is a comedy of manners. It is um and it is a magical book for me because I wrote the first three chapters almost in a daze because I could hear the characters speaking.
mhm,
And that experience has never happened again. Okay. I
mhm,
didn't have to work very hard for those first three chapters to come out. They came out because there was no choice. I had to write it.
mhm,
It was coming out of my pores.
mhm,
And a lot of people have written to me, readers who are so precious to me, and they've talked to me about how this novel has helped them go through their own arranged marriages, or it has helped them to laugh when they were sad.
mhm.
Um, because it's just generally a ridiculous book about a ridiculous custom made sacred by ridiculous people, right? Um, and I had tremendous fun, writing it, and amazing, amazing.
And you wrote this, the whole novel after your divorce, within that
No,
one.
I wrote half of it
Mhm.
before I got married for the first time, and then I was told I was not allowed to finish it. Can you believe it?
Goodness, goodness.
Mm, mm. And then when I left, I said, well, I might as well finish it now. And at that point, I felt like a hypocrite because I was telling my students to be brave with their writing and all of that. All the while, I had a manuscript hiding in my side table. So then I decided to send it out. And, you know, Musharraf Ali Faruqi was extremely kind, and he was key in introducing me to his agent, and his agent took it on.
Mhm.
Um, and, and things unfurled as they have. So, yeah, that was the story of how it happened.
Wonderful. And then I sort of interrupted you, and you were telling me about a firefly in the dark, which is also.
Yes. A firefly in the dark for me is like the child that nobody loves but me. You know, it didn't create, uh, it has been read and appreciated a lot. But because it's not about arranged marriages, it is not about women, it is not about, I don't know what they call it, a human interest story. It is a fantasy fiction.
Mhm,
It is a more niche book. And I love it. And I think it is better. Done a better job of writing this Firefly than I have in How It Happened because it is completely creative. There's no personal experience there,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know, and I'm very proud of it.
Thank
Um, and I wrote it when I was in England and I was pregnant with my daughter. And it came out after I had had my daughter. And, at first, honestly, I thought that nobody would read it because with how it happened, there was so much fanfare and all of that. And with Firefly, for the first couple of months or even 6 months to a year, nothing happened. And I said, okay, well, it's obviously a flop. But slowly, it's had that trickle effect of people reading, commenting, and slowly, 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 it's become a, a small little thing that the people who like that sort of thing love it. And I'm very grateful for that because I wouldn't have liked it to be misunderstood. So the people who read it get it, you
Mhm,
know?
mhm.
Um, yeah.
Well, to be honest, I've only read the first three chapters so far because I
Of
picked.
Firefly?
Yes,
Mm.
yes, and I was wondering, have you read at least the first three chapters to your kids or to your daughter?
So my daughter hates to read. And every time I say, Beti, do you want me to read any of my books to you? She says, Ammi, do you have to? So, all she said about A Firefly in the Dark is, Mom, why did you call it Earth? She's 7 years old, right? So she says, why do you call it A Firefly in the Dark? You should have called it The Firefly in the Dark, or just, Firefly in the Dark, or
Hmm.
something entirely different on me. And I said, Betty, you've not read the book, so how can you say this? She's like, oh, I just have a feeling. So, with a daughter like this, I'm very thick-skinned.
Met your match in your daughter.
Totally, totally. Yes.
And so I want to talk to you about this, about your having children and how that fits in to uh, does that where does the writing go um, when you have three small children?
It actually never goes away. Writing, you're always thinking about the story. You're always thinking about the characters. You're always thinking about, oh, I need to use this for the next book, or you need to. So it never goes away. Uh,
I meant directionally, not that the writing would go away, but that does it?
yeah, yeah. So I wrote uh, A Woman on a Suitcase during COVID with twins who didn't sleep, who were, I think, at that point, 8 months old.
Mhm.
And I found that I took Stephen King's advice, and he said if you write 500 words every day, which is not a lot, then in a year you'll have a novel.
True that. I can barely get four sentences in a day.
Yeah. And by the way, those sentences don't have to be very good. Like I said, the first draft is you telling yourself the story. Once you have that, then you can edit it.
Mhm.
And for me, editing takes a longer time because then I'm trying to figure out how to fix the story. The craft element comes in.
Mhm.
So, but I told myself the story, and all I did was, okay, this is my time. I have to write 500 words. It was wajib qurbatan illallah. It was like, no, I have to do it. And I wrote it. And, after a while, after the first 2, 3 weeks, I remember once sitting and just writing 2,000 words. And one day 5,000 words. Then I got a babysitter and I said, when we were allowed to open up a bit, and I said, look, you need to give me 5 hours because I can see this novel ending. I can see the ending. And I wrote it in a very short amount of time. But because I think I was not able to write more than 500 words a day, suddenly it was bursting forth out of me. I don't write well, I've realized, when I have a lot of endless amount of time. I procrastinate, I watch television, I cook, I do my gardening. But if I know I have a small amount of time, then I write very fast and I write pretty instinctively.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so I think motherhood has helped in that way, you know?
you should say that because I feel like ever since I stopped my day job,
Yeah.
stopped writing. Um, I don't know whether that's a function of the little book company because I have so many other people's books to read and go through, or
Mm.
that's getting in the way of my own writing. But with more time on my hands, I feel like the writing went away.
Yes, because I think that it also when you are doing a million different things as you are and as I am, because in my day I am the primary carer of my children. I have to cook, I have to do laundry, I have to clean, um, and
That is
make
a
sure
lot.
that, sorry.
That is a lot.
Then I'm also, by the way, doing a university course because I want to go back to teaching. So I'm doing all of this. So it is a lot. It is a lot.
Do it yourself. So you don't have,
I
uh,
do. I do have help. So I do have someone who I have asked. So you have to be very strategic. So I've asked for someone to come in twice a week to do the cleaning.
Mhm.
So then all the cleaning I have to do is topping up, right? So when I say clean well, after with three young children and a teenage stepson, there's a lot of top ups to do. So there's a, regular maintenance, but the deep cleaning is done by someone else. So
Mhm.
I do have help and I do have someone who I can call regularly for babysitting. Okay.
Mhm.
But I find that whenever I have a long stretch of time, I get no writing done. But if I have 1 hour, I will write my 500 words. And perhaps that is what I was coming to is that when you're doing a lot of different things, then you make a time. And if you have an inkling for a story, then the story is basically begging to come out in one way or the other.
Mhm.
But if you're doing nothing but sitting for the story, it seems to take its time, and you have to draw on an immense amount of discipline to keep sitting there rather than doing something that's more pleasurable or that has more immediate gratification, you know?
Yeah.
Like talking to you is lovely because I'm getting a response. But when I'm writing a story, it's very lonely and I want to escape that loneliness. But when I've done a million different things, then perhaps the story writing becomes a bit of me time as well. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't find writing a lonely experience at all.
No, really.
Yeah, I find it very, very much a sort of a companionship and a world that I enter. And I just love that experience very much. So I'm not at all alone in it. But I do think that what you said, I mean, so that doesn't resonate for me. What does resonate for me is doing a million things and then getting an hour to write in. And for me, that was more that my brain was being fed by 5 or 6 or 7 different experiences. And when I
Mm,
had 1 hour to write, I was so charged.
exactly. Yes. And also, by the way, I was having a conversation with Amir Hussain, the great Pakistani
Mhm.
short story writer, novelist, everything. He's just a maestro. Um, and he said something very interesting. He said women's time is very different from men's time or from time itself. And I love that. That, reassured me to a certain extent. Because women's time, women tend to give up a certain portion, 2 decades or a decade and a half of their time to children or
Mhm.
to their careers or whatever. But if we look at time, um, from a larger perspective, if we step back a little bit, we come into our prime a little later, I think.
Mhm.
And that's okay. That's given me a bit of reassurance. But okay. And also, I feel like creativity, everything that I'm doing is creative in its own way. I cannot just have one kind of creativity in my life. And all creative people, I hope this resonates with you, all creative people need variety. And I think that's what I was hinting at when I was saying that if I only have the full day to write a novel, that's not enough for me. That's boring. But
Correct.
if I'm doing a million different things and I'm writing my novel, then I am getting the pleasure that I need from my pleasure writing. I cannot sit for 5 hours and write. That's just not me.
Yeah, that
I'm
resonates
yeah.
for me too. I can't imagine what that would feel. I first of all have never had that kind of time, but I can't imagine just sitting in a room and writing. When I hear or read writers who, in interviews, they talk about how they go up into their attic or their, woodshed or wherever it is, garden
Most of these are men, woodsheds, roll dal men.
sheds and attic. And
Yeah.
like, are these people who can do this and have that kind of time? You
Mm.
but and how is there? I guess they're in a way saying, congratulating themselves for having such gigantic imaginations, that they are not in need of any outside stimulus. But
Mm.
um,
It's just a
doesn't work.
different way of going, It's just a different way of whatever ticks your box, I suppose.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm kind of wary of sort of making that kind of a dichotomy, men and like this and women like that. I think it's just individual experiences, um, how we are shaped by them. Um,
No, I think there is something to it.
yeah.
I think it's very easy to dismiss, oh, men have all the time in the world and all of that. That's not true either.
Mm, not
But
it
most of the great writers that you see who are men have had little wives to organize their lives for them, so they are free to do what they need to do.
completely, completely.
I will not take names, but I know many writers who, say, "Oh, we disappear for 5 hours on the weekend to write," and I said, "Oh, but what about your children? What about?" But oh, the wife takes care of them. Oh, great. have to do my writing, despite having an incredibly supportive husband, um, after the children have gone to bed, or while they're at school, or after all everything's been done, because men are not just are free, most men are free from housework also, which takes up more time than the children, in fact, sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so there are always exceptions to the rule, and there are some men who don't have this experience. But from what I have observed of most male writers in Pakistan, um, yeah, I think they have the benefit of other people, not necessarily women, but other people organizing their life for them so that they can devote. And then, they have all the time also to then post, promote, network, go to a billion festivals. All of these things take time. Like if I came, I've only done one festival after Sophia was born, and I left her with my husband for
Mhm.
4 days, and the amount of grief I got. You left your child. I left her with her father. I didn't abandon her, but this is your primary responsibility. You left, and my mother was the first one. She said to me, "You should be eternally grateful to your husband." And I said, "For taking care of his own child, I should be eternally grateful." Oh, but he does a real job. And therein lies the rub, that my job will never be seen as real. Even if I earn the same amount of money as him, I don't think it'll be seen as real as his job. And I think this is another function of the patriarchy.
I must say you've been fighting quite a few battles there, or at
Yeah.
least facing quite a few battles.
Yeah, I feel like my mother is also 40 years older than me. So there are lots of generations,
Hmm.
between us.
Hmm.
Um, by the way, she is also, I mean, lest it may anybody, misunderstand, she is also someone who's shown me how with every age you change. So I keep shocking her with my behavior, but then she's curious enough to realize, oh, this works, rather than just dismiss me, you know?
Hmm.
But the instinctive reaction is, but this is wrong. And then I think that is very indicative of where most people who are not as flexible as my mother then tend to criticize.
Yeah. Well, she's growing. She's growing with you, you know.
And she's always growing, and she's 82 now, and she's still learning, she's still adapting.
Mhm.
Life is not a closed chapter for her as it is for most people her
That,
age or even younger. And I think that is pretty amazing.
that is brilliant. And so now that your third novel is done and put to bed, right? Uh,
Yeah.
are you working on anything new, or have
Yeah,
I?
I've started a fourth one. Um, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I have a very strong character who is pretty feisty. And I remember I was basically asking into thin air, what is your problem? What's wrong with you? What's your problem? What problem do you have that I need to solve? And very reminiscent in the style of how it happened, the first time. Then I heard voices back. Um, I just got an answer randomly. I said, "What makes you think I have a problem? I have no problem." And I took it from there. And I can't go into too much detail because I don't know what it is itself. I'm still writing it, but I'm excited. I think this is a very difficult story for me to write because again, not based on personal experience at all. So I have to do a lot of research.
Mhm.
But the character's there. She's solid.
Oh, wonderful. How exciting. And you think you'll get this into shape in the next year or so? Or do you think this will take you longer?
So I can get it, I can write it down, the first draft, no problem. I'll write it down within the next year, but it's the editing that takes me forever because then I don't know what to think of it. Then, I get to the point where after the 24th or 25th draft. I'm like, I don't know what to make of this, you know. But I hope that, I think with each novel, I think I can, although the uncertainty is there, and I think you'll relate to this because you've written so much. But I think when you first start writing off, you have the same sense of jitters of, will I will, how can I ever write a novel? I don't think I'll ever be able to do this.
Mhm.
But then you write it, and I think I'm getting braver and more mature in the editing process,
Mhm.
which is I don't have any trouble writing the story. I have trouble, or well, I won't say I have trouble, but it takes me longer and I have to work harder at shaping it
Mhm.
to the form that is the right vehicle for it to be told, you know, that is the right shape for it to be presented to a readership.
Mhm. Or
That
let
takes time.
go of your, you know, pieces which you think are just wonderful, but
Yeah, yeah.
stand. What is it called? Killing Your Darlings or something like that?
Killing your darlings.
Mhm.
I'm very happy to kill the darlings if it serves the larger, and I'm impatient. And I think with editing, you have to leave your novel aside and you have to put it aside for a while and then go back to it, and you do see it and you, I just can't, you know, and then I edit things and then and I realize I should have not edited it, and it's a botched up job. So
Mhm.
I think I need to learn more patience when it comes to editing, you know. Um, I love writing the story. That's fun, but editing is, you know, I'm
Is-
beginning to enjoy it, but it's hard work for me.
Well, Shazaf, the thing is that you have another novel happening and brewing, and you have a good 2 years at least to be with it. How wonderful is that?
It's amazing to have a process, to have a project to obsess over. It's so lovely. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have this, you know?
It,
Whether it is published, whether anything becomes of it, which I hope it does, that is very incidental. But the first flush of writing a new story is so much fun.
and on that note, then, Shazaf, I think we'll end this podcast. Uh,
Oh, thank you so much, Maniza. It's so lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Shazaf. It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much, and good luck with the writing and
Thank,
everything you do.
thank you so much. Vice versa.
Bye bye.